What the hell is Saw Sports or whatever that last call was talking about? What the hell is that?
Guys are from Free Love, man.
What's the motherfucking deal, man? Welcome to Saw Sports. I am your host, Ed Honcho. Today we're going to get into the Oakland Raiders versus Houston Texans, taking place today at NRG. Derek Carr taking on Deshaun Watson. Should be a very interesting matchup to watch. Hey, make sure you're following Saw Sports on all the proper social medias below. Let's stop wasting time. Let's get into it right now. So when you're looking at these two teams, they both boast a very similar record. The Raiders have had a bye week. I think that's the only distinction that you could say. But they come in at 3-3. Texas come in at 4-3, and they probably had a couple of losses that they wish they could get back, games that they probably could have won had things went a little bit differently. And sometimes you kind of wonder what Texas team is going to show up. But let's kind of take a look at the records. And again, like I say, 3-3 for the Raiders, 4-3 for the Texans. But I want to take a look at the mutual opponents. And again, that is the Chiefs and the Colts. Colts being an AFC South opponent for the Texans, Chiefs being a West opponent for the Raiders. So I think that you have to look at a couple of things when it comes to these matchups because, again, you look at your own division and how you compare because it's about winning your division to try to move on into the postseason. But the Texans lose to their divisional opponent. The Raiders lose to their divisional opponent. But when you cross divisions, the Texans were able to successfully defeat the Chiefs, and the Raiders were able to successfully defeat the Colts. And so, again, that's why it's kind of hard to just say, oh, this team is significantly better than this team. I would say on paper the Texans are much more talented than the Raiders, but maybe Gruden has these guys playing a little bit above par. And we can talk about some health concerns and issues either way. They do have a quality offensive line that I think is going to be interesting to see how that fares against this Texans team because I think that, again, like they've had some favorable matchups throughout some of these games. And health has benefited them. Well, we're taking on some injuries. The Texans are taking on some injuries. And, they're going to have to be able to play through those things. And, the next man up mentality, they went and got Conley from the Raiders. And I'm going to tell you how that I think is going to play into some things here shortly. But, which is interesting because last year they went and got DT right before they played the Broncos. Again, I still find that a very odd thing that the Texans do, but it is what it is. You got to fill positions of need when needed. But, so looking at, like I say, mutual opponents, they're both 1-1. You can't really put either team ahead of the other. But let's kind of look how they rank league-wide compared to the rest of the league. Like I say, you have the Raiders putting up 21 points a game, 371 yards a game, 233 passing yards, 138 rushing yards. And yes, I'm rounding for those of you. Well, the screen, it says 137.8. Well, why are you saying 138, Honcho? Just rounding is no big deal. Across the board, and you see the Texans put up about 5 more points a game at 26. Then they're putting up about close to 400 yards a game, which is good for fourth in the NFL. And then with 396, then 262 yards passing per game, which is just under 10th, and then 134 rushing yards per game. So the one category where the Raiders are leading the Texans is they are coming into this with a better running game than the Texans, which is going to be very interesting because I think it's going to have a significant impact on the outcome of today's game. Then you flip the side to the other side of the ball, and then you look at defensively. The Raiders' defense is poor. It's not very good. Across the board, they're almost in the bottom of the league in points, almost giving up 28 points a game, giving up about 377 yards per game, which is good for 24th. Giving up 290 passing yards a game. They're almost giving up 300-yard passing. This is where it's going to favor the Texans because the Texans have thrived. Their best games have come against some of the worst secondaries in the league. They were able to have success against Kansas City. They were able to have success against the Falcons because of their terrible pass defenses. So when you have guys, well, Fuller's going to be out, but when you have guys like Stills, Kuti, D-Hop, Fales, Akins, these guys are definitely going to be able to exploit these poor secondaries. And then with these guys getting rid of Conley, I think adds another slight void. I don't know how much damage it's going to do to an already bad secondary, so I don't think they feel like they took much of a loss. But we'll see if he's an addition for the Texans or not. And then they're giving up 87 rushing yards a game, again, against a Houston Texans attack that's giving you 134 games. So that's going to be interesting because also in the Texans defense, they're giving up 84 yards a game against a slightly better rushing attack from the Raiders. So I think the running game to me is going to be very interesting today to see how that happens. But again, the Texans are giving up 23 points a game, 360 yards themselves a game, which isn't that much better as far as total yards, but giving up 276 through the air. Again, not that much better. Was it about 14 yards difference? So a first down difference. So again, I'm not going to sit here and act like the Texans secondary is stalwart or that much better. But let's kind of move on. Let's get into a comparison of the two quarterbacks who will be slinging the ball today. And you have Derek Carr, young brother of David Carr. David Carr is a Houston Texans legend. If you don't know who David Carr is, well, I don't blame you. But looking at what he's done, he's had 140 attempts, 74.1% completion, which is nothing to scoff at. But again, he has a significant lower, almost 100 less attempts than Deshaun Watson on the season. So that could be a reason for the inflated completion numbers. But he's put up 1,410 yards, 8 touchdowns, and put up half as many interceptions with 4. Deshaun Watson, on the other hand, 235 attempts, 69.4, which is nothing to scoff at itself, almost 70%. 1,952 yards, 13 touchdowns, 5 INTs, and we can tell, we know what happened. I won't put all of those interceptions on Deshaun. Some of those were receivers' fault. Some of those were miscommunications, and again, people just took advantage of it. It kind of is what it is. I think across the board, if you were to ask league wide, I don't think anybody would come in here saying that Derek Carr is a better quarterback than Watson. I don't think it's close. I don't even think it's a question to even ask. Like I said, looking at these sack leaders, and again, this is not your best defensive players. Some people, if you're new to this, we do this preview every week on Saw Sports, comparing the opponent. It's not about your best defensive player, but right now Whitney may be the best defensive player on the Texans. Had a real hot streak to start the season. It's kind of trailed off a little bit, but again, y'all went with 8 tackles, 4.5 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, and which is interesting because, like I say, with the very few tackles, but has half his tackles are basically sacks, a little bit more than half. So I guess when he does make a play, it's a significant play. So you have to be commending him on that. But then you have Merciless with 23 tackles, 5.5 sacks, 5 tackles for a loss, 4 forced fumbles, and 1 INT. So again, like I said, his numbers have tallied off a little bit the last few weeks. He started off real hot. Hopefully he can get back on track with that, kind of finding a way to get back in that groove. That's what we'll be looking for today to see if he can find some success against Derek Carr. Moving on to the running back. Now, I talked about the running game earlier and how I think that it's going to be integral today. I think Jacobs is a young kid, nobody that you should take lightly. I think he's a guy that can definitely find his way, can change the game. Again, let's talk about it. 109 carries, 554 yards, 4 touchdowns, 5.1 yards per carry. Now, in comparison, you have Carlos Hyde, who has a few more carries, 2 more carries, about 90 less yards, 461, 3 touchdowns with a 4.2 yard per carry average. So coming into this comparison, Jacobs is clearly ahead. But again, like I say, Hyde is nothing to scoff at. Few fumbles under his belt. I don't believe Jacobs has any. So that's somewhere where you kind of got to be cautious. But, Hyde is clearly made up for those games that he has had a fumble. He gets in, he runs hard. And then, not to sleep on the tandem of him and Johnson, and then what Johnson brings to the table, kind of a different dynamic, especially in the passing game. So I think the Texans situation with the rushing and then what Deshaun brings to the table also is with his feet. It's not going to be just Hyde, but I think primarily with the Raiders, you're going to have to focus on Jacobs as far as what he's going to bring to the table. Now, going to the wide receiver comparison, and usually, again, I think against the Chiefs, it was also Kelsey. Usually it's not about the tight ends. I don't really focus specifically on the tight ends. But being that Waller is the Raiders' best pass catcher, he is the focus today. 44 receptions, 485 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 11-yard average per catch. And D-Hop has 5 more catches, 508 yards, 3 touchdowns with a 10.4 yard average per catch. And, many consider D-Hop one of the top receivers in the league. Of course, down here in Houston, we consider him the best in the league. And last year he proved that. This year, some different things have been going on. They've been playing a little bit differently with Fuller previously being healthy. And now those things have changed. Now, looking at all these factors, looking at all these numbers, yes, they sound good. They sound great. But I'm going to give you my honest opinion and my prediction for this game coming up next. Now, again, before I get into the prediction, make sure you're following Saw Sports on all the proper social medias. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you want the freshest flavored H-Town sports, talking Texan, and make sure you go to Saw Sports TV. You can get that Astros, Dynamos, and Rockets talk if you are an H-Town sports fan. So, looking at this game, again, I usually save my score prediction, who I think is going to win for the pregame show that we do about starts an hour before the game. And I am going to do that. But I think a lot of Texans fans are coming into this game thinking that the Raiders are going to be a pushover, going to be an easy team to walk on. I'm not going to go that far, because something that I've been harping on the last few weeks is what Texans team is going to show up on the field. Because, again, we saw a Texans team that struggled against the Jags. We saw a Texans team that struggled against the Panthers. And maybe it's cats. Maybe it's cat fucking mascots that we struggle against. I don't know what it is. Are Texans afraid of cats? I would hope not. But all jokes aside, both of these teams were backup quarterbacks that were able to kind of push the Texans to the limit. One to beat the Texans, the other to kind of push the Texans to the limit. Again, like I said, about a half a yard. You're talking about a different game. So I'm not going to, at this point, I don't feel comfortable saying the Texans are just going to go out and blow out any team. The Falcons were just terrible. The Raiders have some poor defensive statistics, but I'm not going to use that as a metric, because, again, it depends on what offense shows up. It depends on what Bill O'Brien wakes up and has for breakfast this morning and says, well, this is how we're going to go out and play ball. It depends on the game plan that they come up with, and they say they have a knack for getting guys ready so that, Conley's going to be playing. The Raiders will know his strengths and weaknesses, and Carr may be able to exploit that. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, to see what we have going on and how health plays out throughout the game. So I'm not going to sit here and say that the Texans are going to have a blowout. I'm leaning that the Texans could win. If any late news comes out that changes my opinion on that, just trust me, we'll address it in the pregame show. But I think the Texans win this game. Again, I'm going to say my score prediction, mark my motherfucking words for the live stream. So make sure you're there. Whether you're a Texas fan or not, everybody's welcome in the Sauce Nation. But hey, again, I am your boy at Honcho. Y'all are freshest motherfucking ingredients in the world. I don't have a comment of the day for this video, and normally I do. I don't have one for this video just because of the timing of the video, but make sure you leave a comment under this video, and the next recorded video, you could be the comment of the day. But with that being said, again, like, subscribe, follow all the proper social medias below. It's your boy at Honcho, man. Y'all be cool like y'all be cool. Y'all are freshest motherfucking ingredients in the world. Y'all stay saucy.
Perfect.